Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Madhav Rajan. I'm the Dean of Chicago Booth and the George Schultz Professor of Accounting here. I hope you all had a great summer, and thanks for taking the time to be with us today. This is a fantastic event. I'm just thrilled that we can welcome Booth alum, Dr. Marcel Erni, co-founder of the Partners Group, to our first Distinguished Speaker Series event for the autumn quarter. The DSS is a long-standing Chicago tradition, of course, and the aim is to bring in leaders from the community, from the government, from business to the school to share their insights and experience. So we started the virtual DSS series back when the pandemic began in sort of spring 2020. And at that time, we had used it mainly to speak to alumni about COVID-19 and how their companies were responding to it. But the model has been so successful and the series has done so well that we decided to keep the virtual DSS going. We're able to do more events, and we're able to do events for specific regions as well, which works really, really nicely. And we've had great chats over the past couple of years virtually with people like Tom Ricketts from the Cubs, Jenny Scanlon from UL, JP Gann from Inns Capital, Jose Antonio Alvarez, chairman of Santander, and many, many more. And most recently this summer, we had Gus Sauter, former CIO of Vanguard and Booth alum, of course, back in July. So without further ado, let me turn it to today's speaker and introduce him. Marcel Erni, Dr. Marcel Erni co-founded the Partners Group, which is a Swiss private equity firm. They have over $125 billion in AUM, and Partners Group serves over 1,000 institutional investors worldwide. So Marcel is an executive member of the Partners Group's board of directors. He's a member of the board's investment oversight committee. And before that, he was CIO of the Partners Group till 2017. And he also serves on the board of directors of many portfolio companies, right? Global Blue, Telepass, Amega, and others. So Marcel, before he founded the Partners Group back in 1996, worked at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. Marcel, of course, got his MBA from Chicago Booth and also has a PhD in finance and banking from the University of St. Gallen, Switzerland. Marcel, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dean Rajan, and I'm honored to be here. And thanks, by the way, for your leadership. I also wanted to, just before we get going, pass on some kudos to you, how you're steering the school through these interesting times. You know, it's really great to have you at helm. And so thanks that I can chit chat with you and whoever's on the call.
Great. Thank you, Marcel. I appreciate that. So maybe just start by saying what prompted you to pursue an MBA at that time that you did?
You know, I mean, at that point in time, you know, 1,000 years ago, and please apologize, you know, that I only can, you know, take reference to my kind of path, which, you know, was, I think 30 years or 35 years by now, you know, when I was in Chicago, you know, but at that point in time, you know, it was really not so common for international students to go and take an MBA in the US, right? There were no like institutional exchange programs and things, you know. So, but my university, University of St. Gallen, which was kind of is in the German-speaking part of Europe, is kind of the EU university that he went to. You know, we had an exchange program with Chicago, actually the only exchange program with any university at that point in time. And now I think there are many, which is, I think is great, you know. But there were only 5 slots, and it's kind of, you know, like, I mean, it was so early also, you know, I say, hey, why not? Why don't we try? And, you know, and just try to get on an MBA and international experience, and America sounds great. And then, but, you know, it was also hard to get on in these programs because it was so restricted. So I think it was, to be honest, I don't recall why I wanted to take an MBA. Maybe, you know, I just thought it was cool. And also, you know, you need to remember you know, and you know, young people today, it's hard to kind of imagine that, you know, but way back, you know, it was, I mean, if you were a young student, you know, I mean, the saying was, well, until you're 30, you don't really get to work on a real job. Right? It was very hierarchical, very, you know, so I said, well, okay, I was young and said, okay, So why not, right? I mean, versus today, like today's student, you are almost overwhelmed with many opportunities, and you can be relevant and add something right out of the gate, but way back actually was less so, right? So you just trying to kind of do things and then see how things are. And you didn't also think so much about career planning in that sense, so it escapes me a little bit, to have a good reason why I actually went to Chicago, but I got in, and then, hey, why not, right? That is probably how it ended up in Chicago.
And what do you remember of the experience there, Marcel? Was it interesting? Did you feel like it was very educational for you? How did that sort of affect your decisions later on?
No, I mean, I think it was just really, really great. But less so from, I mean, of course, right, you would say, well, you learned so much from Merton Miller and Steve Kaplan and maybe Smith, and who were the professors there. I mean, it was just really great. But honestly, I think it was not the courses, the course material that really at the end helped me in my career. It was more, having to prove himself in an international context, having to see, okay, what's the difference between American students and European and the Japanese, and having to kind of go through this whole experience and realizing also, hey, I mean, for example, my Asian colleagues, they were way better in math, than we ever were. It was just embarrassing how good they were, and then they're, so I think it's just really this whole experience, that is what really helped to shape you and opening your eyes actually in how the world is shaping up. I mean, again, that all sounds totally trivial today, but way back actually it was not, right? Because it was way more, kind of compartmentalized, and you didn't really have a chance to get to know other cultures and other backgrounds. So I think that was really the experience. Also case studies, I must say, and yeah, I think I think it was the experience, that really made you, I think, a little bit more mature, or one more step, right? And I think for sure at the end, okay, I mean, you added something to your CV, which helped you then to get next job, and then things kind of have to come a little bit, right? So, well, I loved it really. I mean, it was really just a great experience.
So Marcel, we had many questions that the students submitted in advance, and also to those participating, feel free to send in stuff through the Q&A, and I'll try to weave them into the discussion as we're going through. So Marcel, maybe then talk about sort of what made you decide to start the Partners Group just 5 years after your MBA. Is that something you knew you were always going to do, or was that something that came sort of later after your MBA?
No, actually, that was not planned at all. I mean, after Chicago, I went to McKinsey, and then I went to Goldman, and it was more about finding out actually how I wanted to work. What kind of work I wanted to do. I mean, McKinsey and Goldman were great environments, and still today, I think, great companies of consulting and banking. But I just, and I said, you're going to have a career and everything. Yeah, but, I don't like it too much, So I just thought, well, if I don't like it really that much, probability that I'm going to be really successful in this over a long period of time, I think is not so high, because if the colleague next to me is probably smarter than me anyhow, and she or he is more motivated to do it, I think they're going to be more successful. So I just thought, like, this is not like a really good idea to do something. And I also wanted to I'm really kind of a small town guy, and I just wanted to be essentially in Switzerland, in my hometown. And my ideal was, why don't one or two my friends, and we do something, we do a deal per year, and then go skiing. That was really kind of, so it's also, and I mean, again, it may sound totally strange to hear this today, but I mean, there was no such thing that you would start your business after business school. I mean, you were essentially the loser. Like, okay, and also with my parents, quite frankly, I thought, okay, now you may have a real job and you have a career, and now you do something, like that was not an easy discussion to be had, right? No, I mean that's not what you did at that point in time, especially not financial services, which were very, you had the organization first and the individuals later. So I think it was really not really. Also, it was not planned to be a big corporation. So I just wanted to have an environment that I felt well in, that I would enjoy. And then I think, probably good things will happen, And they always said, well, if we screw this up, right, we'll always find a job somewhere, when you're young, right? That was a little bit the attitude. So I hate to admit, but there's unfortunately no real strategic planning or career. I moved this and this and that, It was just like I wanted to have a different work environment, so that I would feel happy,
And was it an overnight success, or was the beginning sort of rocky? It's how did you manage?
No, I mean, of course, as expected, it was a total nightmare. I mean, like in first year, I think, everything that of course, we had a brilliant business plan, right? Nothing, of course, happened, and then we went around and hustled, and we did, we essentially came into private equity by coincidence, because what we wanted to do was kind of wealth management, with sophisticated clients and family office and this and that. And of course, we didn't get any clients. And then we just, then the whole, Netscape IPO happened in 1996, 97, saying, oh, what is this venture capital? This is interesting. Why are we not doing it? So it was just, I mean, we stumbled into private equity and venture capital. And in the first year, I mean, we were doing things like we raised money for the first Russian long-short hedge funds. We raised money for a Utah-based voice recognition startup. I sold one or two companies, and we just did whatever kind of paid the bills. And then over time, okay, then you kind of started to, okay, this is actually the market, and start to tell you actually this is actually something that could be happening. This is also, by the way, always I'm thinking also when maybe sometimes people ask you, what should I do if I want to do private equity or if I start a firm? It's like, I mean, if you just do something that other people are already doing, it's probably not going to be very, very big. But if you do something that nobody is doing or very hard to do, at the beginning, it's of course very, very hard to get traction, and you need to hustle and you need to survive it. But if you're right with your hypothesis, and I think we were at the end, like I never understood why are the institutional investors not investing more in private equity? Because the majority of all companies out there are in private hands, not public hands. You only talk about the public companies, and it makes no sense. You should have access to the equity risk premium also in other parts of the market, which is private. And then, of course, when then that kind of conclusion or starts to sink in and the market comes, then you're at the right, then you've been there, you're doing it, and then you get real traction, right? So it's actually the reason that it was actually that the beginnings were very hard, but actually were very good, because they forced for us to find something actually that people were not doing. If you just do like yet another this or yet another that, okay, I think it's not really going to work out, especially if you're young, right? I mean, if you're very established, we're like, then you leverage your network, you this and that, but I think you're not going to build something fundamentally big. I think you should be trying to find something that, that is not yet there, right? So hard, but hard was good. Is kind of the answer, I guess.
Also, here's a question that's maybe too broad that came in advance, Marcel, which is how did you build Partners Group into such a well-oiled machine?
Because of brilliant planning, everything clear. No, I mean, no, listen, at the end, it is, I think if you do hundreds of small steps, also with the mistakes, and try to learn and constantly improve a little bit, and you compound this over a long period of time, then over time, it just really becomes the way how the machine works, right? But I couldn't even tell you, okay, when did you come up and doing this way? It's just like it's this a lot of small steps, you know. And I think also, I mean, of course, you always at each point of time you have a hypothesis of, okay, that's what we need to do. This is what we're working on, right? And then, but it's not like this constant adjustment that actually builds very robust firm at the end, you know. So it's also, you know, like if you had to do a case study on this, I don't know, 1,000 little things, you know, and then, you know, but with having a team that has been at it for a long period of time. That's, for example, when I think, you know, for example, in the financial industry, if you take the banks and take, you know, like the very successful banks like Goldman, Morgan, or JP Morgan, you know, and there are lesser successful banks. And I find, you know, if you look at it, the lesser successful banks, you know, next to like leverage or lack of incentives or alignment or lack of ownership, really, it's also, you know, if you look at those banks, I mean, if they're rotating through the executive team every 3 or 4 years, you don't have any institutional learning, right? I mean, it restarts at all, you know, and you know, I think one of our benefits is just like having been at it like now soon at 30 years, you know. It's just kind of remember, you know, okay, how about this? You have an institutional learning. Of course, this time might be different, right? But at least you have a foundation from which actually you can start and then compound. So I think continuity and compounding your entrepreneurial steps, those are probably the two things that at the end lead to this well-oiled machine. So but it's not like a brilliant one thing or two things, you know, that is not, that's also not what financial markets allow you to do. I mean, the world is, you know, like it forces you to change and adapt all the times, right? So, yeah.
So Marcel, you raised one point that we had a question earlier saying you've established a terrific team. As you said, that's made a big difference. And the question is, what do you look for when you hire somebody? Like, what are like the traits that you look for, and what are the ones that you say, you know what, I just don't want somebody like that in, you know, at the Partners Group?
Yeah, I mean, let me think about how to answer this best. I think there maybe let me go at it from two versions. You know, like for example, if you hire younger people. And I was also, I mean, I took many roles. I also was head of HR at some point. I think I hired up to like 500, 600 people, you know, so I interviewed everybody. So I have done thousands and thousands of interviews. And that, by the way, interesting enough, you know, at the very beginning, I was very Chicago style, very asking, okay, what's the whack on this? And, you know, like, you know, technical questions. And then over time, I got way softer, but I think way more efficient in interviewing. And I think my criteria were always kind of three things, what I was looking for. The easiest one is always what I call just horsepower. You know, like you need to, and horsepower you can see in the CV or your background, what you did, or, you know, with case studies. But the horsepower thing, that the hard facts, the analytical thing is easiest, I think, to check. But, you know, if you have somebody with a great talent, horsepower, as I call it, that's not enough. Then I think you add to that, you know, you need to have a cultural fit. You know, like it needs to be somebody you want to really have a beer with, you know, because otherwise, you know, it's you know, no matter how smart she or he is, right? I mean, it will not help you because, you know, what we do is a lot of teamwork, you know, as a single person, you cannot pull it off. So the second thing is really looking for this cultural fit. And the third one is then expectation fit. You know, it doesn't know, you know, like very smart, like her a lot, but she wants to be the CEO, you know, at 25 and say, maybe it takes a little bit more time, right? Then you can never, so you need to have an expectation fit. Those are, I think, maybe the things that how I would recruit. And then I think in terms of what we look for, I mean, you know, it depends. I mean, you know, I think a little bit what you're recruiting for, you know, if you look at recruiting into portfolio companies or in the leadership team, like more senior, you a little bit different packages at the end than when you recruit for younger talent. But at the end, you know, I think it's all next to what I discussed, right? I mean, it needs to be a person that really is obviously smart and nice, curious, and I think most importantly, really wants to learn, right? Because we are really a learning industry. Like I look at our investment package every week, and I look forward to reading it over the weekend. You have 2,000 pages and finding out about new things, or how is inflation hitting now that business or whatever. You need to want to have this constant learning, willingness and curiosity about the world and trying to find it out, right? And also with that, I think I will just also see, very team oriented, a good mix of hard and soft skills. And then, for example, if you're more executive or CEOs, like they need to have big picture strategy, but also how to execute. So I call this high and low, hard and soft. So it all adds up to different. At the end, you need to be at each point in time of your career. You can be a full package. And if you're 15, the package is a little bit different when you're 25, and it's going to be different when you're 30, 40. But always work on that. So I think it's a little bit a non-Chicago wishy-washy answer, but I think that's more about and then also, by the way, it also doesn't matter, one person is one thing, but also then the team, right? I mean, how does it feel with the team? Is it helping the team? Are you growing with the team? I think this is as important. Also, I think for younger colleagues at an early stage of career, right? I mean, you should be in an environment actually where you really can learn also from the team, because no matter how smart you think you are, the team is always smarter, So that's the kind of, it's not really a good answer, but I think I don't have a better one.
I think it sounds great. And so I'm going to ask you a question about culture, which came in from somebody who maybe knows your firm well. It says, how does the firm's ethos today differ from your founding, where you were doing one deal a year and doing skiing afterwards with friends? I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
And so the question is, do the Denver and New York offices still embody this? And how has the growth of the firm changed the culture?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think this is really, that's the most challenging part, right? I mean, I think I know with 1,600, 1,700 people, you're going to go 3,000, in a couple of years down the road. So how you do that? And it's really a hard thing, to be honest. And it's also, as you build up, sometimes you're too centralized because you need to have processes and standards and one thing, and then you want to kind of decentralize a little bit more. Then you want to, some things you need to be very strict on, something you want to empower the team, something, it's a real challenge. And also, by the way, then you have the generational issue, like old farts like myself, we just think, oh, boom, 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 that's how you do it. And with the younger generation, it's a different setup that you have to work with them. So I think it's a hard one. But I think what we try to do is really try to tell our stories, just take ownership, be an entrepreneur. We try to organize ourselves also in cells, we call it, your center of influence is actually not the 1,700 people or 6,000, but actually you 5-10 people that you work with all the time. Be entrepreneurial there, care for them, know when they have their birthday. That is your center of influence. That's what you call Zen. So try to be an entrepreneur in your own merits there. And then also I think what we're building out now is against all common wisdom, I guess, we're building out massively our real estate around the globe. Because we did it in Denver and New York, and we're doing now here in Switzerland, and just really build a campus that really shows how we want to work, who we want to be, and facilitate this culture of collaboration and entrepreneurship. And so yeah, but it is still, I think that is for sure the biggest challenge, right? I mean, how you manage, and I think also there's no like one thing and then you're done, right? I mean, it's a constant thing, and you can only try, and so that's a very good question.
So Marcel, on the collaboration, where have you all landed on the whole work from home flexibility thing? Is that still an ongoing thing, or is that you feel like you've made a decision and you're...
Yeah, I mean, our leadership team, they rightly so, they have decided that we're going to have some flexibility. I think, I don't know what the things are now, 1 or 2 weeks, I mean, some like front office, traveling, back office, a little bit operations, a little bit different roles, but essentially we're going to, I think, allow for a day or even 2, with exception. Personally, I hate it. I'm totally against it. Because but I realize my approach will not work. Okay, so that's the generational thing. So a hybrid thing, but I'm a big believer in being together, working together, huddling up together, going through the night shift together. And then also, because also, I feel like, especially to young people, I mean, some second or third order effects people have not yet thought through. Okay, so I'll give you just 2. So let's say, and those are real cases. One of our female leaders, she's absolutely fantastic, unbelievable. She's working in infrastructure. She has family, kids, everything. So she of course goes home, has the kids, isn't it? And then then she gets on again to the work, which now means for the juniors, could also be, we say, hey, you shouldn't be always on. You shouldn't be now expecting to start, okay, working again at 10 or 11, 12 o'clock, right? Put it away. We want our people to have a rhythm, work, life, this, that, right? I mean, of course, you can say, well, you can also do it from home, but what we observe a little bit is, reality is, especially young people, then they just tend to be always on because the boss is now back on at 10 o'clock. So that's one second order effect that I think people haven't thought through. And I just keep telling guys and ladies, if you think you can do your job very efficiently from home, absolutely agree. I tell you, home is in Manila, not in New York or Denver and things, So it will lead over time to a massive offshoring and cost-cutting exercise, which I think is unfair to the people. And then the third effect is, also young people say, well, if you're home, we don't even know you. You become a number, and I don't want people to be a number. I want people to be, we want help in career and development, and for that also you need to have the water cooler discussions. Otherwise you're not building up. But hey, listen, I'm old, I've given up. I'm not winning. I'll let the new generation figure that out. I just say, hey, I'm not sure it's really healthy for the people, Okay. So I worry a little bit about many of those things.
All right, so let me switch topics. We have a question that came in now, but one that came in earlier, which is similar, which is over the last decade, you've seen this big change, right? The size of PE funds is sort of getting bigger and bigger, right? The size of funds people raise. And so you're targeting sort of larger companies. And the question is, if they're better managed, is there less scope for operational improvement? Do you see that the PE value add proposition is sort of changing as, it just gets bigger and bigger?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's changing, but and of course, like at bigger companies, gravity starts to think in, right? I mean, in smaller companies, a small change on leadership or this and that might have a more rapid and more direct effect than when it's a bigger companies. But on the other side, I mean, you would be surprised how undermanaged actually big companies are. Who says that actually you just assume that everything is actually really well managed, and I tend to disagree, but it's harder to have an effect because of just the sheer size of it, so yeah, it will change. But I mean, overall, the private equity industry, people say, oh, it's a hype, and when will it stop? And I think we'll be massively bigger, and not because we are smarter or anything, but I think just we have a better, I think private equity or private markets, we have a better way to own companies or assets. you know, if you are a public investor, and then let's now leave the activist hedge funds on the side, you know, but if you're just like you know, most public companies actually they don't have I call a real shareholder. They have many shareholders but nothing to say, and then they have the shareholder voting things there. There's a word, isn't it? But you know, like adds zero to strategy. No ownership, no alignment, no nothing. You know, like no all short term. You know, no value add, nothing. So I think private will be way bigger because we simply have a better way on how to own and manage assets. You know, that's why I think we will grow and do bigger things. I think also private equity over time will also, I think eventually will also continue to just to buy and also take stake in public companies. You know, and so I think we'll live for. But hey, of course, I'm biased, right? I mean, I think this industry is the best since. But I'm really convinced about this. You know, so
okay.
And also in this environment, you know, like say, well, okay, let's just see how. I mean, of course, you're going to have failures, companies that don't do it, funds that will go up, and that's how it should be, especially for Chicago, right? I think that's exactly what markets actually do, right? That's the weeding out and making the better and survival of the fittest and all that, right? So that's exactly why I think private equity will do better and grow quite a bit.
So what is the future for generalist PE funds? Do they have to specialize to compete going forward?
No, I don't think. I think there's really room for both, right? You can be very specialist in something, or you can have a geographical focus. That's one thing, how you do it. And then there are generalists, right? The generalists like us, like we just see way more, right? We can do, and we do say, okay, I can do this buyout here in Spain, or this in this growth capital thing in India, and you know, so it's a different thing. It also goes with size. I mean, the bigger firms tend to be the generalists, right? You might have some specialist firms and this and that, but well, overall, I think it's almost like at a different part of the market. You know?
So going back to, this is sort of related to your earlier answer, Marcel, why did you decide to take Partners Group public? And how are you different than, say, a KKR or a Brookfield or companies like that?
You know, at that point, I mean, it has been a while now. I think they'll be a public, probably 15 years soon. You know, it was just, I mean, the main reason was just to, you know, I used to own like a third of the company. Now I'm down to 5%, you know, and that's good though, right? Because, you know, it was a way on how to pass on ownership from one generation to the other. Like, what do you want to have, like own one gas station or have 5% of Shell kind of thing, right? And you know, in our business, it's very it's a people's business. So really want actually to have a broader ownership over the firm. So you need to have how do you pass this on, and the bigger you get, and the more difficult it's gonna, you know, be to how to determine the actually fair price at which you pass on ownership. And we thought, well, you know, a public market is actually a good arbiter for that. So that was the main reason actually why we did it. And I think we've been faring well with that. Yeah. So and there's no, I mean, KKR and
Brookfield was the other one.
That's the same, you know.
Oh. So a general question, Marcel, just about trends you're seeing in private equity, and does it vary by geography, say Europe versus America?
That's a very open question, right? I mean, I think Europe and US is the same. You know, it's just growing. Private markets will, you know, keep on doing more, bigger. Asia is a little bit a different spot right now, because I mean, you have the whole China thing is a little bit. That's like the big elephant in the room there. So that's almost like now a separate continent, really, that is no longer part of the integrated private equity world. It used to be a little bit, but by the way, there are 10,000, 20, 30,000 private equity firms in China also. It's just like a closed system. So No, but overall trends, I would, I couldn't name you one. It really gets down to which industries, different things are happening, But I think, it's just, I don't see a trend. I think the trend is that we're growing.
Mhm.
That's the only thing that I think I can see. And actually that maybe the trend is actually more and more investors actually like the asset class, right? Because it kind of does something good in their portfolio. It kind of moderates a little bit volatility through the way, how the evaluation mechanism works. So that helps. And we'll still, sometimes people say, well, like, I can buy, why do I need private equity if I can buy an index and then leverage that? That's the famous Josh Lerner Harvard thing there. And then say, well, Mr. Professor, why don't you do this and buy the S&P and go to the bank and get some loan, and then I'll do my private equity portfolio with the same leverage. Here's the little thing that you're missing. If I have a portfolio of 10 companies and one goes hops, right? I still have 9 to go, right? If markets tank and you get a margin call from your bank, right? You're wiped out with your leveraged public market position right there. So I think it's really, you cannot compare those two different styles. They're really, I think one has leverage from outside, the other has leverage from within. And then think, like the private equity, I mean, we have to and should and will, I'm pretty convinced about, generate an attractive outperformance through the cycle, call it 3, 5, 6%. Not all the time. Sometimes you also don't get it right. And that's fantastic. That's what people like. And actually then they say, well, and I'll get it actually at lower volatility in my portfolio. That's why both institutional investors, but also increasingly high net worth individual, even retail, say, well, that's just fine for me. And that's also, I think that's maybe thinking about it, and sorry for my brainstorming bubbling here, but I think that is probably the ultimate change, right? That actually we get allocated way more capital. Maybe not this year or next year for the denominator effect, but structurally, I think we're a growth industry. And then we'll figure out what we're going to do with the capital, right? I mean, it's easier one.
Thank you. So question about just Europe in general, which is sort of, given what's happening, how do you think sort of the supply chain nearshoring, as opposed to, having it come from Asia, and energy independence, how is that all going to play out in Europe? Sort of, again, a broader question.
What do I know? That's, no, but listen, that's a little bit, that is maybe a question that goes more into macro factors, right? I mean, what do you think about, okay, supply chain, inflation, labor shortages, war, blah, 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 and I think, by the way, if you're thinking about the things now, you're a little bit late. So that's one thing, and the second thing is really, we're not spending a whole lot of time trying to figure those things out. You need to, because honestly, nobody knows. It's way too complex, way too dynamic. And by the way, there's, another alumni, Howard Marks, he just recently published a very good paper. I just read it actually over the weekend. The Illusion of Knowledge, it's called. It's all about the forecasts, the macro. Like, it's a very worthwhile read, by the way. I really highly. It's very enjoyable, and he actually also confirms that, like, it's too complex, right? So I think what we try to do is thinking scenarios, of course, being cognizant of the world that we're living in. Say, okay, test everything that you do against, okay, if inflation goes to 20%, if it goes to 0, if interest rate go to this, what does it do, right? And that is a more realistic approach, and then think, okay, what can we do about it? And focus really on what you can have an influence on, so more micro than macro. And so that's why generally, like, when I'm being asked what I think about this, and I don't know. It's just like, but I don't want to be naive or casual about it, but you need to, I think it's really the wrong way to think about this, because you're not going to change it, and and then you're wrong, and then what, right? I mean, it doesn't help you. You think, okay, and how it's more like which kind of assets, that what you want to invest in, how would they fare in different investment, how can you grow out of it? Do you have the right capital structure? What are these are more relevant questions, and the kind of the macro environment that changes, right? By the way, it's also it might be, actually now is actually an easier time. It's kind of this famous thing, like I think Bonderman said this once, I think in the financial crisis, like he remember he said, like, okay, if it feels good, it's bad. If it's bad, it's good. And right now it feels very, and that's exactly the point, right? I mean, this is actually, like at this point in time, you need to have your homework essentially done. I mean, you need to have refinanced your portfolios, your inflation things under control, budget, know what the things are. And it's more like going on into, okay, what do we do? Where can we buy? Even if there's no debt around, what can we, so, buy low, sell high, that's kind of the thing that you need to bear in mind. So apologize if I don't have an answer. I don't know. I think those are really big questions, of course, but I think it's more thinking about scenarios, what will the effect, right? And also think of, okay, what do you think could be in 3 years, in 5 years, right? And, and just also with just like also that time horizon, you already realize I have no idea. Nobody knows, right? So that's why you have more a heuristic approach on how to think about how macro factors can actually select your business and what you need to do about it, and what to do and what not to do. So, but I think especially for the students, if there's some listening to, I think okay, if you're studying economy or econometrics, I think enjoy, but I don't think this is a good career choice, quite frankly. I mean, at least not like in private equity, we will not need those skills, quite frankly. And if people also sometimes you say, the private equity guys who go on boards or like on TV and talk about the dollar and all that, that's all marketing. They have no clue. Like, that's my hypothesis. So go and test. Anyway, also in Howard Marks' pieces about try to look at the track record of everybody is on the TV and talks about, this and about that, So, not so sure. Okay, so, close the topic, I guess.
I'd love to answer.
I know you have a good economics department. I don't want
to. No, we don't teach people how to do forecasting. So here's a question about time horizons, Marcel. So I don't know if this is empirically true. The question is, do you think LPs will need to adjust their expectations if liquidity events are taking a little longer? So in turn, would PE approach opportunities differently if you had a longer horizon? Is that, in general, do you feel liquidity events are moving out in time?
Yeah, of course. But for now, right? And that's the great thing about private equity. Well, we have time. Of course, we're not selling now. What do you mean? Like, I mean, that's exactly what private equity does. And I call this kind of a mandatory saving program for institutional investors. Like forces them actually not to do stupid things a completely wrong period of time, right? Because the inch now is, we should be selling. No, you're not selling now. You keep compounding, you're buying now. That's the difference, right? So, and through private equity, through the locked-in, LP structures, we have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
As long as the underlying assets keep on compounding or doing their thing, it's everything's going to be fine, so and yes, the answer is it might take longer, but they're locked in already. So this is not, I think this is not a problem on our side, what we do, but it's a problem on the modeling side, more on the client side. And of course we're helping our clients also, of course, sensitivity, risk analysis, like cash flow planning, keeping investment level up, the forex moves, what that means on cash flows and so on. This cash flow modeling actually and also with risk scenarios, that's actually one of the things many investors, limited partners still have areas actually really to improve, and that's what we're helping our clients to navigate through. Right? Yeah.
So this is, I think, related to what you mentioned, that question says, despite uncertainties and volatility, direct and secondary activity in PE has been resilient and actually solid in relative terms against other asset classes in 2022. And sort of, do you see that continuing in the next couple of years?
I think it will be fantastic. I think there will be a massive secondary opportunity coming for as we think, totally wrong reasons, like overextended investors or also happy investors that you say, we want to kind of take down a little bit the allocation, because that's the other amazing thing, like in my simple world. Okay, so you're a pension plan, public pension plan in the US, so private pension plan. You have a 20% asset allocation to private equity. Private equity over 15 or 10 or whatever the numbers is. It does fantastic. You're very happy with the returns. We get into a crisis. Private equity gets to 25% of your asset allocation because public equity goes down. And now the consequence, so what is, we need to reduce the well-performing asset class because of, and of course it has to be liquidity. And I say, yeah, but you don't need liquidity now. What's the point? It's so structurally wrong and forces them institutionally to do a buy high and sell low. And I'm sorry, I get when people say, well, you have the denominator effect, we need to reduce the private equity portfolio. No. Reduce your public equity portfolio and be happy with your private equity portfolio, right? But of course, I'm a little bit biased, but it's mind-boggling for me that in year 2022, after the global financial crisis, after Corona, we have exactly the same discussions again, like 10 years ago, like no learning whatsoever.
Okay, Marcel, I'm going to slightly switch tack and ask you a question, Kim, which I'll reframe slightly, which is when you fund projects, you're looking at profitability. To what extent does, I'm just going to use the word, what extent does ESG play a role in the decisions you make, Marcel?
Yeah, of course it's nowadays. Of course, it's important because the investor community wants it. It's all good, right? So yeah, but I think we have been one of the first, to subscribe for UNPRI things and all, and we have an old team. We do that absolutely, but I'm just not willing to support all this form over substance discussions. And 90%, he called it, I think it's really, pathetic. Just people want to be popular or do the right thing to do the right thing. If you are a real responsible owner of a company, of course, you worry about the safety, the health, about pollution, about, why do we even have to make this a category, right? It should be the natural thing that you do. The only thing I could say, well, okay, why don't we make a real investment now that actually might not have an immediate, actually that might cost something and might not have an immediate effect on your returns. But then the point is, well, but it will make the company better. And if you make the company better, you'll get a higher valuation. So it's capitalism, free markets to tell you actually do the right thing. And if you want to now put a label on it and this and that, I'm happy, do that. I'm all good, fine. But I really want to make sure on our boards that we really proud owners deeply care about those things. And, and private equity, unlike public equity, again, before we buy a company, we can actually do due diligence. We actually go and see actually the supply chain, whether you have something murky going on somewhere in China or this and that, right? We can actually do the work. And if we have the problem, we actually can do something about it. When you're a public market investor, you have nothing. You know nothing. It's just, well, they have an ESG rating of X. And then, yeah, okay. fine, congratulations. By the way, if you work into, I tell you one thing, that's always one of my favorite ones. If you work into, it can work in any Chinese factory, any Chinese company, just to put, pick now China as a big all. In every receptionist area you come in, they have in the back of the receptionist an ISO certificate and an ESG certificate. I've never come into a company actually that doesn't have like a certificate. It's a little bit like, that's the other irony, that I find, like in 30 years of doing this, I've never come across a presentation where it didn't say, we have an excellent management team. I think that's statistically a little bit a challenging one, right? So I don't, no, you don't have, probably. You might have a good one, but it's, so all of these things, is maybe a little bit Chicago style. Hey, let's do some second order thinking. And not just shallow, superficial, try to be popular, political correct, and actually not deeply care about the substance of the matter, which is an important one, right? Which is health, is safety. It's about, the climate, it's about pollution, absolutely. But let's really do it impactful in a true and entrepreneurial matter, and not just in a format over substance kind of matter. Sorry, I got a little bit off on that one.
No, that was a great answer. Thank you. Question about sort of what do you look for when you're hiring, in the sense that, is there a particular path for an emerging fund manager in PE? Do they have to come from investment banking and private equity when you look for them?
For us to hire?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like in private equity, no, I think we have two career paths now, mostly we hire out of schools, and then we train our people over a long period of time. And by the way, this is also a little bit, in our industry, if you get out of school, it takes 10 years, I think, until you are a full package. It's just like, it's not like, 1 year, boom, done. Right? It's just because, you need to go through cycles, have own source, this and that. So it's just like, there's no shortcut, unfortunately. Experience just keeps on, and you keep on compounding actually what you're learning. But then, so banking or consulting, of course, are good backgrounds, but also I think our industry increasingly, or at least we are doing this, will hire way more people with operating backgrounds. I think we have now a network, I think, of 500 CEOs or things that are in a network and or invested with us, because as in private equity, as the asset class grows and will substantially grow, right? To simplify, you have 3 tricks on how to make money, right? Buy low, sell high. Now actually could work again. Leverage is the second one that might be available, but right now it's a little bit less available. But thirdly, but overall, but those are things that come kind of with the cycle, but overall, like with more and more capital coming to the asset class, I think kind of the inefficiencies, kind of get smaller and smaller, and that's actually how it should be. So I think the main focus will be more and more actually in what can you really do with the assets, right? Beyond what actually the management actually currently thinks that is planning. And this is also where the generalist firms can add, or the specialist firms can add. So that's and for doing that, I think this is why our private equity firms will have again way more people with operating backgrounds hired into their teams. And by the way, we have a model where they're both part of the same team. So people with financial background and operating background. And by the way, also maybe another idea I was thinking, what I also would recommend to people who say, well, I don't have an investment banking background or everything. So how do I get in this industry? I think, that really interesting. I think don't try. Okay, you're not going to make it. Or you're going to make it with some smaller firms and this and this and that. What I would do is actually try to get into companies that are being owned by private equity or venture capital firms and have a career there. By the way, when you're part of the MIP program, a management incentive package, upside can be actually bigger even than what you could potentially make at a private equity firm. So if you prove yourself being a good CFO or good supply chain or digital this or that or CFO, whatever, I mean, we will find you, trust me, and we'll pick you and say, hey, you want to come up, do the next gig with us? I mean, you know, this actually, this operating track record, that's the scarce resource that we're going after. It's not like the money, it is, I mean, that's all, I mean, complicated and still, you know, it's competitive, but, you know, this is at the end, a very, very critical aspect that, you know, how can we get actually, you know, the great operators into our companies? And this is, I think, a great career path to think about. Hey, now I can make as much, if not more money, if that is also a criteria, how you choose your career next to, you know, that you like what you're doing. I think, you know, working for a private equity owned company might actually also be an interesting one. And then over time, you might say, well, now we work 2 times with you. Actually, you're great. Why don't you join us? Right. So that's an easier way on how to, I think, get into the industry if you don't really have a banking background. So, and that has changed a little bit, you know, that's changing to 10 years ago. Private equity firms will never say, well, you know, like you just hire, you know, an operator, this and that, right? I mean, you know, but now I think this is changing, and that poses a real opportunity for somebody who wants to go more the operating career path, which is, I think, is exciting.
Yeah, Marcel, it's a fantastic answer and answers a question that many others have put in. So thank you for that. That's great. We have one question coming about sort of, given that there is so much dry powder now for deals, how do you feel, what is sort of your competitive advantage as the partners group, right? Like, how do you get to source and sort of win those deals?
Yeah, I mean, one thing, you know, like, I mean, ever since I'm in this industry, you always says there's too much money. Okay. And actually, I think in our case, we're running out of money right now, you know. So so I don't think the industry has a problem really with too much capital in there. And every firm has their own way on you know, where they hunt and what they think and what their value add and how they win and what they win. So it's a little bit like in football, right, or in soccer, right? I mean, you can play like Bayern Munich or like Barcelona, right? But you know, but you need to pick a style, and then you have your playbook and you go. So I think there's not and as I think, you know, this industry intrinsically have a better governance model on how to own assets, I think we'll just go and expand automatically our fair kind of capital markets, and I think that's what I think how it will work out. So I never worry about, you know, this is also something like, do I know? Who knows whether it's too much capital or not too much capital? Right now, I think overall, I would say it's not enough capital, right? So, and that can change again. So, but a good question. I mean, fair question, but it's not something that keeps us up at night, like 1 second.
So, Marcel, I have 2 flips of the same question. We don't have that much time left. One is, how hard is it to do succession planning? And the person was pointing to Carlyle's recent problems. How do you all think about succession planning? How do you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, that's related to the question with the IPO. You know, like we said, well, when we did the IPO, I was 40, and we said, well, we do succession planning now at 40. You know, because you know, and you know, because the clients also want to see you and this and that, right? So if you do succession planning when you're 70, you know, I don't know. And of course, I mean, all those firms, they have succeeded successfully in a long period of time. I mean, there's still, of course, if Mr. Rubinstein is still such a prominent figure and figurehead still, you know, or perceived to be a figurehead, then people think actually it has not really succession. But of course, they have done the succession. KKR has done the succession, and of course, those founders really also they still have a say, and they, by the way, you know, we are big investors in our funds, you know, so we're very well aligned, you know. So I don't think, and I don't know about the Carlyle situation. I mean, that guy seems to be just like out of his mind, you know, to think I don't know him. Maybe he's worth that money that he's asking for. Probably not, you know. So, but I think in general the industry is doing that well enough, because I think also to stress again, many of those, especially older firms and older founders, of course, they've been lucky and have been able to accumulate a little bit capital, and they are by far sometimes the biggest investors in their funds, right? So you really have good alignment, there, I think. Again, whereas a public equity, also like when a banker comes by and says, should buy this fund, and say, well, how much have you invested in this fund? Not really. I said, well, why should I? No, with all due respect,
Marcel, one last question. Who have been people have you had good mentors through your career? Who have been people who have helped you?
Not really, because, we were very young when we started, and I think it was more like we learned it a little bit as a team, and I think you should have a good mentor.
Wow, not quite sure what happened there. I guess maybe it got cut off because we are beyond our time. Anyway, I'm not sure if Marcel's is going to be able to come back. We are out of time, so just wanted to thank Marcel on behalf of the school and myself for being so open, which that is sort of Marcel's trait, and being so informative in all the discussions that he did. And thank you all for joining us, and I'll see you virtually at the next DSS as well. Bye.